mother
gotta, like,
or
kiss the
graduated
mic.
there in Oregon.
Okay, we'll see.
Are you close to Meredith?
Welcome.
I just had this friend, it's a dining room named
I'm welcome. It's nice to see such a big crowd. We've done a good bit of civil rights programming over the years, and it's a topic that that really fascinates and moves and intrigues a lot of people. So nice to see all of you here today. First, I'm going to do a little commercial too. I want to tell you about the North Carolina collection. The main purpose of the North Carolina collection is to collect and preserve the history of Durham. City and county. As you can imagine, we have a lot of books. That's what you think of when you think of a library. What really makes the collection unique, though, is the other things in addition, there's certainly some unusual books and that kind of thing, but the other things like photographs, maps, we have papers of individuals and organizations that nobody else in the world has but the North Carolina collection. So we're really proud of those things. I wanted to tell you too, we are in sort of an effort now to collect more papers from the community. We have a $100,000 grant from GlaxoSmithKline. We're using a portion of those funds the first year to reach out specifically into the African American community to find materials. You may have seen in the Herald Sun that we just got Howard Clement's papers. We're so delighted to have those. Irwin Holmes, who was the first black athlete in the ACC, has donated his papers. I'm picking up a small group of photographs this week. I won't tell you more because I'd like to have things in my hand before. But anyway, it's a really exciting effort. And if you do have materials, I hope that you'll give me a call. Anything related to Durham, you don't have to be a city councilman. You also don't have to be African American. We take anything from people that shows the rich history of Durham. I want to thank, before we get started with the panel, Katie Spencer, who's back here from the Museum of Durham History. She's the executive director, and she's doing a pop-up museum, so please go back, take a look at the things people have brought in. It will sort of give you more information about what these people will be talking about today. Now to the program. Eddie Davis, who's our moderator, is the former president of the North Carolina Association of Educators and was the first practicing classroom teacher to hold a full voting position on the State Board of Education. He retired from teaching English at Hillside High School in 2008 and now explores his interests in various areas of Durham history. He's done some wonderful African American history related programs for us before, and we're really looking forward to hearing from this great panel he's put together today. So let's welcome Ed.
Well, thank you very much. I think that in the long run, that should be about all you will hear from me. This panel that we have here is really the focus of what we'd like to talk about today. I just want to set a sort of context for what we'll be talking about here in Durham. The year 1963 was pivotal. But leading into that year, we obviously are aware of the 1954 Brown decision that outlawed the separate but equal issue in public schools and in public accommodations. We all know that in 1955, the Montgomery bus boycott went on, and it catapulted Martin Luther King into national prominence. We know in 1957, there was the Little Rock school integration issue. 1957 is another time that's important, and we'll save that for a little time when we talk to Virginia Williams. But in 1960, in Greensboro, there was a sit-in that sparked the whole idea of sit-ins and wade-ins and all kinds of ins that came about because of the Woolworths lunch counter sit-in in Greensboro. But in 1960, there were lots of issues that were ongoing, and there were continued struggles and quests for human and civil rights here in North Carolina as well as around the nation. But 1963 was a very pivotal year. It was in 1963, we know, that Medgar Evers was assassinated. You know that that took place 50 years ago, about less than a month ago. John F. Kennedy made a very, very famous speech dealing with civil rights during that period of time. Also, there are some comparisons between 1963 and 2013, 50 years later. We had sort of shifted from one pope to another 50 years ago. We had gone from Pope John the 23rd to Pope Paul the 6th, just as we've done this year with the changing of a pope. Although different from that year, we now have two popes. Well, one pope and Pope Emeritus. There was a famous Supreme Court case that came down in 1963 that dealt with prayer in school. And of course, we are all anticipating next week's three biggies, one on affirmative action and two on the issue of same-sex marriage. George Wallace stood in the schoolhouse door, as people call it. He stood at the University of Alabama doorway trying to prevent integration at the University of Alabama, and of course was Nicholas Castlebaum intervened and asked Mr. Wallace to get out of that door and allow the integration to take place. And of course, after this period of time, there was, of course, the famous March on Washington that you'll be hearing more about, and probably some programming here in the library around that issue. And of course, unfortunately, on November the 22nd of 1963, we lost President Kennedy. So 1963 was very, very important. But if you look at where Durham was in 1963, it had a lot to do, Durham had a lot to do with the movement that was going on. There were opportunities here in Durham for national civil rights leaders to come to Durham. In fact, in 1962, in August of 1962, Roy Wilkins, James Farmer, and Floyd McKissick, three of what was called the Big Six, in terms of the leadership of the civil rights organizations, were here out at the Howard Johnson's Hotel, which, for those of you who aren't long-term Durham folks, it was really out across from what was South Square. And there was a massive meeting that was held there, sort of a surprise meeting. And I think Jake can talk a little bit about that later on, as well as Faye and well, almost everybody on the panel can talk about that. But after a church service, folks just got in their cars and rode out to Howard Johnson's. And there was two young women from Durham, one whose name was, last name was McKissick, Jocelyn McKissick, and a woman named Gaetana Horton, whose last name now is DeGraffenreid. They, along with two white men, went in and were arrested at the Howard Johnson's Hotel. And there are people in this room who probably can tell you a little bit more about that, because some of them were very close to Jocelyn McKissick and others at that point. That led to lots of other activities from August of 1962 until the period of time that we want to talk about today, which was that springtime, particularly May and June of 1963, that went on during that period of time. So I want to start by having Virginia Williams to go back to 1957, tell us a little bit about the Royal Ice Cream Parlor sit-in, and then take us up from there to 1963, and then we'll involve other people. I want to really allow this to be more like a television or radio interview, so I'm going to start by asking Virginia to talk a little bit about that, then I'll be talking to some of the other people on the panel about other aspects of the issue.
Thank you, Eddie.
Get it real close to your mouth, you're going to kiss it. Okay, now try.
Is it better?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thanks, Eddie, for inviting me to say a little bit about
You're fine.
About the Royal Ice Cream Company. My only regret today is that I'm always the one to tell it, and I want people to know it was 7 of us who went to the Royal Ice Cream Parlor to sit down to be served. It came out of an organization that was organized by David Stitt. He was the chairman. The organization was ACT, and it met at the Harriet Tubman Branch YWCA. There were no women in this organization. The way Mary, Vivian, and I got there, we were accidentally on our way out that Sunday afternoon, as young girls did. And these men, it must have been at least 20, maybe 25, were coming in, and they seemed excited, and they were smiling and talking, and one said, "Come to this meeting." And I said, "What kind of meeting is it?" He said, "It's a political meeting." Well, I'm from Northampton County. I grew up on a farm, and I watched my father slip off to the NAACP meeting and a lot of other men without telling anybody, without telling us, but we stared our mama down, so she had to tell us he's going to that NAACP meeting. And I always made up my mind, if I ever get the chance to go to a meeting like that, I'm not going to slip up. I'm going to walk in there with my head up, and I'm going to let people know I'm there at the meeting. Well, I came up here, accidentally ran into a group of men who had exactly that on the mind. So when they said it was a political meeting, I thought, uh-oh, this is my chance. So we went in, the 3 of us, sat down, didn't say a word, didn't ask any questions. David Stitz wasted no time getting straight to the point, what we were all about. And at the end of the meeting, we decided next month, which would be June the 23rd, 1957, we're going to go to one of the establishments. You could go to any of them because all of them were segregated. We'll pick one, and we will go in, we will sit down, we will not leave. There was 2 things we were sure of. Number 1, it was going to be a nonviolent sit-in. Number 2, once we got through that swinging door, we were going to sit in and we weren't going to leave. So I don't remember who drove. I just know that at the end of that meeting in June, 7 of us went to the Royal Ice Cream Parlor to sit down. The first person that walked in there was instructed that once that swinging door, we knew it was a swinging door. We knew we had to go in the back. We had to go up the steps. But once we got in there, we were told whoever's in front, push that door open and keep rolling. And everybody else was supposed to be on your heel. I don't know who went in first, and I'm not sure who went in last, but we went in and took all of the seats, all of the booths beside the window, and we sat down. The waiter went over to Reverend Moore and those, and he was trying to get them to leave. And they weren't budging, so long as they were comfortable, I was comfortable. And we sat and we talked, the 7 of us. He went back and talked to the manager. The manager came out and looked at us. They went back in there, had another conference. Then they started working down by us. And we kept ordering ice cream. And he said to me, "The manager is not going to serve you an ice cream." Well, if he wasn't going to serve me an ice cream, I wasn't going to leave, so the conversation was over. We started back talking to each other. Finally, we looked out, and as Tyler Perry would say, here comes the po-po. 8 of them, 7 of us. They came and went straight to the kitchen to talk to the manager. Then they came back out, they started working the crowd. "Why don't you just leave?" And nobody was moving. So finally, one of them got down to me and he said, "If you leave now, there'll be no, the manager will not press charges. There'll be no problem. You could just leave, and that would be the end of it. Won't be in no trouble." And I said, "I'd like some ice cream." "The manager's not going to serve you an ice cream." Well, that conversation was over too. So finally they decided they had no choice but to arrest us. We had decided we had no choice but to get arrested. So we sat there when the police came, all the way down, and they took us. They didn't handcuff us or nothing. They just ushered us to the car. One of the men asked if the women could ride together. Oh yeah. They opened the door, put us in, and down there we went to jail. They did paperwork, but as I said, they didn't handcuff us. And we still don't know today who the Bells bondman was. We've been told that there were no black ones there at that time. But whoever did it didn't call no press conference and say, I'm the one bailed them out. Mr. Lewis Austin came down there, but he was too late. We'd already been bailed out. So then we went to Southeastern Business College to where David Stitz was waiting for us. He opened up the nab machine, he opened up the drink machine, and we had nabs and drinks for Sunday's dinner while they were waiting to hear from attorneys. In the meantime, most of us, I think there were only 2 of us from Durham, the rest were from out of town, so I understand that the people in the colored community started to call in because it was going over. They weren't doing breaking news then, they were doing special bulletins. So the special bulletin, they heard it, they said, well, one thing, we got to get them some attorneys. So finally, Attorney Marsh was contacted, and he said, well, you can go on home, go on to work tomorrow. He was going to try to get it put off because Attorney Conrad Pearson was out of town. I went to work. Everybody else wanted to do what they were going to do. About 9 o'clock, they came to my job and said, you're going to have to go to judge, say he's calling this case this morning. So we went to court, took our seats. We were charged with trespassing. Attorney Marsh immediately appealed. We went to Superior Court. The jury of 12 found us guilty. He appealed to North Carolina State Supreme Court. They upheld the lower court. So eventually, the NAACP paid a fine of, I believe, $430-some for us. That was the end, which lasted over a period of, I guess, about 3 years by the time you kept going to court.
Now, when you said David Stith, now do we need to let the audience know that that was the father
of Thomas
Stith,
City Council,
who was a member of the City Council and is now the Chief of Staff for the current governor. Also, you mentioned Attorney Marsh. That was Billy Marsh.
Yeah, and he is still,
Yes.
actually, I saw him today. We worship together on Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock at St. Joseph. The other attorneys were Attorney M. Hugh Thompson, Attorney W.G. Pearson, Attorney Conrad Pearson, and Attorney F.B. McKissick. I also want to lift the names of the Royal Seven. Vivian Jones and Melvin Willis were from Durham. They are both deceased. We don't know where Claude Glenn is, so if anybody knows where Claude Glenn is, please see me at the end of this program. Jesse Gray left and went to New York, but he didn't go there and sit down. Jesse organized the rat rent strike, remember?
Yes.
Yeah, he encouraged the tenants to withhold the money until all of the rats are gone, and according to the paper, it was a success. Reverend Moore is still in Washington today. He's doing well, and Mary Clyburn is in East Orange, New Jersey. So that rounds out the Royals.
And you and Mary Clyburn and Reverend Douglas Moore were here for the unveiling of the highway marker that is over on the corner of Dowd and Roxborough.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be a living monument to the work that you all did. Now, you were arrested, you were fined, someone paid the fine for you, but that didn't cause the Royal Ice Cream Parlor to integrate. There was some other demonstrations that went on that maybe Faye and Robert were involved in.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Faye, do you remember being involved in those things? This is Faye Mayo, who for a long period of time worked here in Durham and now lives over in Hillsborough.
I just saw one person come in and he was involved in it. I believe I saw our senator. Did I see Senator McKissick?
There he is.
Oh, he came in. He was involved in it, so he can tell you.
And he has, now tell me what his name is again. I know he's a senator, but he has a name that was sort of synonymous with another person who was involved in these movements around. What do you know his name? This man right here? Floyd B. McKissick. Oh, Junior.
Yeah, his mom.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we knew who we were talking about here. Yes.
And you mentioned Jocelyn.
Jocelyn was his sister?
Also Jocelyn.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Faye, were you I guess worked with Virginia and others around in terms of the Royal Ice Cream sit-in?
No.
Not sit-in, but the demonstration.
Not.
You did not.
No.
Okay, but you did.
Before my time.
Okay. I don't want to put you for a little bit farther. But you were involved in the demonstrations that went on in the 1960s.
Yes.
Can you quit the mic?
Hi.
Pull it close. You almost have to kiss it.
My name is Faye Bryant May. And for,
Make sure it's on. Is it on?
I was a student at North Carolina Central University from 1959 to 1963. And it is a pleasure and an honor to be here. I found, Eddie called me, I think, around Thursday, and I said yes. But first of all, in looking at the audience, you need to be rewarded for coming and being here. And I would like to see all the persons that were at Duke and UNC to please stand. Anyone here from Duke or UNC that was there during that time?
Faye.
We're going to let you use this one. This one doesn't seem like it's
No one.
It's not.
Oh, I was asking if there was anyone here from Duke or UNC during this 59 and 63.
Really close.
Because somehow we lost contact with you. And you were very, very important in the movement, along with the students, of course, from North Carolina Central University. The first time I went on Duke's campus, I was in the back seat of the car, and we had two white students driving, and myself and a black student. And we had to get down on the floor so that we wouldn't be seen on the campus and possibly charged with trespassing. So it was private, and we were wrong, but we did it.
You said you're wrong.
I don't know what Eddie wants me to say. I have so much to say because those are my posters in the back. I worked for Durham Public Schools as a guidance counselor, and I began collecting those news clippings to share with my students whom I knew absolutely nothing. It didn't go over, but it went well with the students. The principals were a little upset over me bringing up the issue, but I went forth anyway. So I do speak quite often to mostly students, and this is the first time I've seen people of my age here. So I'm very happy to be here. And this is my buddy, Paul. Jake. We were at the Carolina Theater with the round robin. It was raining, and we could not carry umbrellas because umbrellas were considered a weapon. So Jake, along with two of his buddies, went out and got tickets as we marched around the theater. We had tickets, so no one couldn't say we couldn't go in because we hadn't paid any money. I don't know who paid, but anyway, we had tickets. And we kept going around, may I have a ticket? May I have a ticket? So one of the students from Central said, why won't you sell me a ticket? I'm just as bright as you, talking about complexion. And the clerk just fainted, you know. But we kept going, and then there were people on the sidelines saying, calling us all kinds of niggers and calling the white people nigger lovers and all. But we kind of regarded them as crackers, so it was okay.
Now, this was fighting for the integration of the Carolina Theater,
Of the Carolina
our premier
Theater.
theater that we have over here now, and they are going to have a sort of a series of celebrations around the integration there. But you and Jake and others were working real hard to get it integrated at that point.
Yes. Yes. And it's so good to see Jake. To see Jake, it's been many years. Yes. Yes.
Can you tell us about how the black and white students work together? You said that the white students would often buy tickets.
Yes, and we could not have accomplished anything because if it hadn't been for Duke and UNC, I have to admit, because we could not do it alone. Nobody cared about us, just like sometimes now you feel like what's going on in Raleigh, nobody cares about you. But anyway, we united, and they walked through, they were called white crackers and soda crackers, and they kept on walking and walking around there. I buy a ticket. No, you may not buy a ticket. Why can't I buy a ticket? Because, and we kept on going around, and Jake got these tickets, he and his buddy, and gave them to a few of the boys, and they had tickets, so they rushed in, and I guess Jake can tell you how far they got.
Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you all were involved with that?
Well, what we did was just to pass out.
This is Jake Phelps, who I believe at that time was a journalist here.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. I was a reporter for the Durham Morning Herald, and the
Closer to the mic.
and then is that better?
Yes.
And what we did was just to buy tickets. And I didn't do anything heroic. We just bought tickets and then handed them out. Ralph Lucas and Frank Ingram and I bought tickets and then handed them out to black students who were in the round robin demonstration. And then they just, on a cue, rushed to the doors, and Milo Crawford was the manager of the theater, and he was standing there trying to keep the doors closed, and people just kept sliding under it, you know, and getting through. And people, of course, then everything was dark in the theaters, so nobody could tell who was where and you know how to manage it or anything. And one of my favorite memories was when I think it was one of the Riley brothers, Floyd, who got stopped by the policeman there, and Floyd's father had given everybody instructions, you know, that just you didn't have to ask them if the police came and asked you for your name. Ask them if you were under arrest, and if they said no, then or not yet or whatever, then you could say, then I don't have to give you my name. And one of the Riley brothers was there, and he was in the front, right, and the first one that they came to, and they said, "What's your name?" And he mumbled that David Riley, and then he walked up to the next guy and asked him how to spell it. And then he walked up to the next guy and said, "What's your name?" And the man said, "Am I under arrest?" And David Riley just, "Oh." It was like he was finally on stage, and it's one big line, and he blew it and realized it. And he was just blushing, and he was, you know, awkward and apologetic to everybody. But the whole thing was almost like a comedy, because it's all in the dark, and people can see whether the person they were talking to was black or white, and they're having to ask them, and everybody was. It got to be more of just a comedy kind of thing, and people were stumbling and falling and trying to do the right thing. And anyway, that was about the silliest part of the whole thing. It did give you a good idea about how silly that was.
Now, when blacks could go to the theater and enjoy the film, but you had to go up in what was called the buzzard roost, as I recall. Now, was there a separate box office for you to buy a ticket?
Yeah, just on the side of the theater.
You
so-
speak into the
Talking to the
mic.
microphone. Talking to the microphone. You talking to the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, they're on the side of the theater. The theater was a little stairway up to the little box office where you could buy separate tickets.
Now, before the big push, and we'll talk a little bit about that and involve the mayor and all the things that he did during that period of time, there was a big day in August of 1962 when you all went out to the Howard Johnsons. Now, Robert, were you there on that day, or were you involved? Here's the microphone you can use. Yes. That's what.
Thank you so much, Ed, for inviting me. I really appreciate it. But, yeah, I went out to the Howard Johnson and protested just like the rest of us did. But mostly I was at Woolworth and the Crest store.
Can you hold it? Why don't you take it out and hold it? That might be easier.
But I was more involved with people that the protests at Woolworth and Crest. You know, where we go in there and they had it all roped off. You know, the white people could go under there and they could sit and order sandwiches and all that. And there's nothing to be done. I do remember one white kid from over at Duke at the Crest store, which the lunch counter was downstairs in that building. And she went down there and bought 2 sandwiches. One for herself and one for me. You know, but just as soon as I go down there and go under the rope, you want no rest. So, and like Faye was saying, okay, I don't know who did the bailing out and all that kind of stuff. All I know that they carted us off to the jailhouse and go there and do your name and fingerprint, that kind of thing. And then you go. But sometimes we go twice, sometimes I get arrested twice a day. But one time until I go back again. And you know, I was working with Mr. Rivera.
Alex Rivera, the
Rivera.
famous photographer?
Yeah, and we would do a picture, school pictures and that kind of thing. And he'd come home sometimes, I had to finish the work that I was supposed to be doing for him. And he told me, he said, look, you're going to have to get you another job. You've been in jail too much. But, you know, I did what I thought was right at the time. Now, a lot of people said we didn't mingle together. I can remember clearly a club that was located on Fayetteville Street called the Petite Birdland. I don't know if anybody knows it. And the white kids from Duke and Carolina would come down to the back, park in the back of it, and come in and have drinks and everything. Like all of us there illegal, but we still in there. And you know, we had a good time in there. They leave out and go the same way. We did it every week. But you still, when the sun comes up, and you look at yourself, it wasn't there. Everything's still segregated.
Now, you mentioned Woolworths in February of 1960. After the February 1st sit-in up in Greensboro, seems like the Woolworth demonstration spread across North Carolina and across the South. And around the 12th of February, Martin Luther King came to town. Were any of you all marching with him, or did any of you go to the service that he spoke at on that evening?
He spoke at North Carolina Central in the McDougal Gymnasium there.
He also spoke at White Rock Baptist.
Yeah.
I was there.
I was there at the time. Matter of fact, I was doing pictures at the time. I was photographing. I took pictures of Martin Luther King when he came here. And we marched downtown. A lot of the students from the campus would go downtown, you know, a couple of times a day. one of the teachers I'll never forget, Dr. C. Bullwell. Dr. Bullwell encouraged us to go. Matter of fact, he could go with him. And but you don't get that kind of commitment today from people.
Faye?
Oh, this is on.
Take
Yes.
Is this on?
Take it.
Is this on now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would like to say something about Howard Johnson, because that was the big one. We met on campus, went out on cars, because we didn't have cars, and sat in the parking lot after they would not let us come in to buy one of those 28 flavors. Who wouldn't like to have a 28 flavor? One of those 28 flavors. So they said, well, you need to leave now or you're going to be arrested. We stood there and we sang and we sang and we sang. It's amazing what songs can do for you. We were tired, we were hot, we were hungry, but we continued. So the owner came out and said, if you don't leave now, we will have all of you arrested. We looked up and here comes, it was either the Greyhound or the Carolina Trailway bus. And they said, don't leave, don't move, just sit here. So the sheriff had to come around and to each person in the parking lot and say, you have the right to remain here. Anything you say may be used against you. We still continue to sing. So after he read us our rights, we got on the bus. They took us downtown to the jail. And a student from Duke or UNC said, what's going on? And we said, we've been arrested. And he said, for what? We said, trespassing. We didn't know we were under criminal law. Really, and they booked us. He said, well, y'all just write your name. And we said, no, Mr. Charlie, you write our name. So our names were misspelled and everything. We stayed in jail that night and continued to sing and continued to sing. We were hungry, we had not eaten anything. So finally the cafeteria sent some food to us, our regular Sunday snacks, bologna sandwich, and oatmeal cake. And we were glad to eat that oatmeal cake and bologna sandwich. So they finally released us from jail. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we went back to campus. But prior to leaving, the jailer said, ain't y'all tired yet? We said, yes, Mr. Charlie, we tired of segregation.
And it appears that those marches against segregation really did not bring about any real change here in Durham in 1960, 1961, 1962, and then the big Howard Johnson's march in August. But then when you turn the corner into 1963, things were changing on the national level, and we also had an election here in Durham. And it seemed like the two candidates who were opposed to each other were a gentleman by the name of Watts Carr and a gentleman by the name of Wentz Grabarek. And it's my understanding that Wentz Grabarek won that election. Is that correct? And on the night after...
I almost asked for a recount.
The night after that you were elected, understand that there was a real gathering. In fact, it says here that on May the 18th, there was a large-scale demonstration and 700 Negro demonstrators were arrested, and that Grabarek visited the scene. And that was your first portion of your term. I don't know if you've actually been sworn in yet. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. And let me say, first of all, I appreciate it very much you invited. This is the first time I've been invited to be with you here. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. And I also appreciate when Ms. Mayo asked for the demonstrators in the crowd to be identified. I appreciate, I think that's in deference to me. They didn't want to know who was giving me a hard time. As Mr. Davis said, on May 18, Saturday, 1963, we had a municipal election, and I fortunately won, defeating Mr. Watts car. That's May 18, Saturday. On Sunday, we go back to the demonstrations at Howard Johnson's and several other restaurants in town. The jail was full. A crowd is down there. And I don't get installed until Monday, but I get a call at 6 o'clock on Sunday. And it said somebody had better get down here. It was the chief of police, Chief Pleasance. And I said, well, Chief, I understand, but keeping with protocol, I have no authority, no real voice. I said, have you checked with the incumbent mayor? He said, we've looked and looked, we can't find him. And then there was a special urgency in his voice. He said, someone had better get down here. We were looking at a potential riot. I said, I'll be right there. So I went down. When I live about 5-7 minutes from the courthouse and the jail down there. I came up Roxborough Street. I knew we had a problem because cars were parked everywhere. I walked up Roxborough Street, turned left on Main Street, and the place was full. People, our black constituents were on the left on the courthouse side, and on the right-hand side were all whites. And as slender as I am, I walked down sidewise, really, to try to get to the crowd to see what was going on. I got down about halfway in front of the courthouse. I stopped and asked the students, and yes, they were primarily North Carolina Central and some Duke students, mostly students. No, I didn't see too many adults in the crowd at all. And I stopped in the center and said, who's in charge here? And a unanimous voice, we're all in charge. So I took one fellow, I said, more specifically, who can I talk to about why we're here? And they had a huddle, and they told me there's a gentleman down at the jailhouse entrance, and it turned out to be Mr. Hugh Thompson, the attorney. He's never mentioned in this light, and I want to give him full credit because he helped me and the city of Durham an awful lot at that point. I went down there and I asked him, Mr. Thompson, why are we here? And he wasn't quite sure, but he gathered with the group there, and he came back and he said, the jail is full, as has been indicated, and it was. Hundreds were arrested. And we have brought cigarettes and sandwiches to those who are in jail, and nobody will let us in. Well, you can understand that from a police standpoint. You can't just have a crowd fill the jail up, so somebody better come up with some ideas. I thought about it a second, and I said, Chief, give me 2 policemen, and we had a lot of them down there. And I asked Mr. Thompson for his group to name 2 people. And then I asked him to assemble all the sandwiches in one big box that we had, all the cigarettes in the other. They did that. I said, let's send them in. Then we waited for them to go in. They accomplished their mission, came out very nicely. Everybody was very happy. And I told Mr. Thompson, it seems like our purpose probably has been served here, because I saw clubs and bats and a broken beer bottle in the crowd, and they were just looking for that inflammatory moment that something could really break out badly. So we need to disperse the crowd. That's my job here tonight. That's why I'm here, and I need your help. He made a very nice little talk. He said, we think we've accomplished what you wanted to do here. Let's go home. The mayor says he's going to meet with us first thing in the morning, which I did. I made my little talk. We're going to meet first thing in the morning, list your grievances, and we'll take it from there. But let's get rid of the potential crisis that we're looking at. And that turned out fine. So give Mr. Hugh Thompson, the attorney, for his voice, the calmness of it, the fact that they honored it to the point where they obeyed him was a big step forward in our problem as far as Durham was concerned. So after that, I met with the people, and Steve Floyd Jr. here. I spent a lot of time with your dad, young man. 213 West Main Street was 213 and a half. That's the truth. So met and list the grievances, what our problems are and so on. And I wish I had more time, but let me just tell one incident that kind of tells it all. The first thing they listed was, you've got to hire 35 people at Sears and Roebuck first thing in the morning. And I thought about that. That's impossible. I'm not even in office. Much less have a voice, even if I were in office. And your dad got right angry. And he started, literally, I would say, stomping out the room. And I said, Mr. McKissick, and he stopped. And I said, I think you're a reasonable man. And Mr. Speaker says, I think I'm a reasonable man. Why can't two reasonable minds get together and come up with a reasonable solution? He came back. Now that's an important moment in our context, you see. He listed all the grievances. I said, fine. Then I decided to call the leaders of the community together. And there were 60 people, I think I invited, the Chamber of Commerce representatives, merchants of Durham Merchants Association, and several other people who I thought would have intelligent input into the problem in front of us. And I explained the situation to them thusly: you don't have to do a thing any differently than what you're doing. You're all within the law. On the other hand, I'm the mayor of a community that has 1/3 of its constituents, black, who are extremely unhappy with their plight. I have met with them. I understand them. I fully understand the seriousness and the sincerity that they attach to their plight. That's what I told them before, because I said, demonstrations are fine. You've accomplished that purpose. You certainly have. I don't personally, Mayor Grabak doesn't need another demonstration to change my mind on what I think this community needs to do. And that was honored, and I appreciate the community helping us in that regard. They gave me the free time and the reasonable time, the more intelligent time to reason things out, get to the bottom, and see what's best for all of us. So back to the meeting, I told that group that I'm convinced with their sincerity and seriousness. I don't need any more demonstrations. What is the composite heart and conscience of this community? That's what I want to measure. And we talked, and there were just as many on the left, right, and every viewpoint in between that you can imagine, and we yelled at some time, and it just wasn't a very good meeting for a while. But then it started settling down to the point where they said, all in all, Mayor, you appoint a committee to deal with all the civil rights difficulties that we seem to be confronted with. I was glad to do that. It was pretty much my suggestion. I even used the words to reconcile and resolve all differences and meet with all people who want to meet with you. And so I named a committee of 11 people, called it the Durham Interim Committee, and chose as my chairman my opponent. Several thoughts occurred to me. One, Grabak had a slogan during his campaign that kept insisting on community unity, community unity. How better to show our unity as a community than having the man who just lost the election work with me on this common problem. That's what it is. It involves all of us. To Mr. Carr's credit, he did not hesitate. I want that noted too. He accepted the chairmanship. I named 9 white people and 2 black gentlemen. And just to keep the record straight, I was criticized very heavily by the black community because Grabak doesn't know what he's doing. How are you going to reconcile anything 9 to 2? I saw just the opposite. This is a moral problem Durham is up against. It's not the law. The law is Jim Crow. Everybody's living under it. And if it's a moral problem, we better put morality on the table, discuss it, and find out who we really are. And so among the 9 that I picked was Mr. Harvey Rape, ran the Harvey's Cafeteria uptown. A very popular gentleman. Everybody loved Harvey Rape. But he was about as segregationist as you're going to imagine, to the point where just a few weeks before the time we're discussing, he takes his rifle, cradles it in his arms, and stands in the doorway of his cafeteria on Main Street and dares a black patron to come in. And yet I knew the restaurants are not going to integrate unless Harvey Rape is part of it. I went to see him. We talked, I think, well over an hour. He finally says to me, I'll call you tonight. It's 11 o'clock at night, the phone rings, a little after 11. And he says, my shirt is wet with my tears. Then an emotional pause. I have just come in from the woods. Mr. Mayor, I will serve. What a tremendous, tremendous plus for Grabarek and putting that committee together. This man was willing to apply his conscience to the moment. Finally. That was a big plus. I want to mention one other gentleman too, and there are many cases like this, but Jimmy Warren ran the Turnage's Barbecue out on Morandary Road outside West Durham there. And he called me and he said, I'd like to see you. Come on in. So we talked and talked, and finally got to the point I said, Jim, will you serve them right now? And Jimmy Warren said, that's why I'm here. Wasn't that beautiful? Now. We sent 2 people out there. They came back. I'm curtailing this an awful lot. Came back. Did they serve you like everyone else? Did you enter? Did you order? Did you leave? Did you pay? Yeah, everything fine. Tremendous applause. And as I reflect, that gave the mayor some sense of credibility that perhaps this fella may really be able to get things done. So that happened. We broke down the committee into various groups, hiring practices into schools and hotels and motels and restaurants and so on, and they went to work. So, and all of them, just the details on restaurants, for example, they started, well, if 95% of us go along, we'll do it, or 90, 80, and all kinds of ideas. But I repeat, what Jimmy Warren did in serving them in a practical way had an awful lot to do with Harvey Rape, who was heading up the restaurant committee to come in with an agreement that it's okay to serve everyone in the restaurants.
Mr. Mayor.
The hotels, and am I running overtime already?
I just want to ask you
I
about.
haven't been here in 50 years.
I know. I know. I want you to tell the story. I want you to tell a portion, though. There was a national news story that came out about you not only speaking with Harvey Rape and the other white store owners, but that you went at that time, which was unusual, into St. Joseph's Church and spoke to a massive black audience, national news. Tell us about that.
That is correct. I told Mr. McKissick Sr. the first time we met, I said, I'm here to, everyone's my constituent. Whether you voted for me, it doesn't matter. I'm your mayor. You have a right to my office, and we're going to see what we can do about solving this situation. So Mr. McKissick said, we're having a meeting. And I told him, Mr. McKissick, I will go to every and any meeting that you have. Just don't put them on at the same time. I will be there. And so when the word came that Roy Wilkins and Mr. Farmer, I think, and your dad was pretty much in charge, told me there was a meeting, I said, I'll be there. Don't misunderstand, but there I sat all alone. I had no escort. Somebody wondered what I was doing there. Just, who is this guy? But in any event, they gave me an opportunity to speak. And I told them what we were doing, the committee, the time we were going to need, and told them that I understood the sincerity and the seriousness they attached to it. And all I'm asking them to do, as I'm asking of all citizens, black or white, you all have a responsibility to your government. I'm asking you right now for your understanding and support. But I need the time. And they were the ones, I'm glad you brought that up. That gave us the time. And we were on your city. Your city of Durham was on Eyewitness to History on May 24, 1963. in a very, very, very favorable way. Nelson Bent was the newsman. Very favorable. They discussed Greensboro, what a terrible time Greensboro was having at that time. And they showed the theater was having problems over there too. And the violence, and they showed Birmingham. And then at a very complimentary, they showed in Durham, they're working it out on a voluntary basis. They're trying to work it out on a voluntary basis. And so far have already made progress. And then in early July, when the interim committee gave its report, CBS had us on national news and several other times. So we received national and international attention. Mary Siemens was in Jerusalem, Jordan. Said my wife, I've got it right here, a postcard, said, guess where I read the good news? Beirut, Lebanon. That's true. So we got notice from Jake probably remembers this because he wrote an article about all across the world. Durham was in the forefront. One of the first communities. And we've got all kinds of mail that will be reposted in the papers at Duke eventually, showing you what the world thought about it of Durham at that time. And you look very, very, very good. So,
Mr. Mayor, I have an article here that appeared in the June 2nd, 1963 edition of the Durham Herald-Sun. It's a listing of folks who signed a petition saying that they would be willing to be involved in integrated restaurants, hotels, organizations, swimming pools, and other places. There are massive numbers of people who signed this. Folks that some of you might recognize now, people like Sylvia Kirchhoff, who became the first female mayor of Durham. A man who used to be on the Board of Education, Robert Ghirardelli. Robert Ghirardelli and his wife, Mary Siemens and others were here. There were some black folks who signed it too, William and Josephine Clement. And others. So I think there are some copies of that available, and we can make this available also through the library. This is a very important document, I think, because it does recognize that there were some courageous people of all hues who decided that Durham must be different than it had been all of those years. So I'll pass this around and let people in Virginia and Faye, you all want to get in on this?
I want to talk about the theater.
Okay.
I just remember during the demonstrations, usually we would go to St. Joseph AME Church and get our assignment. That's where we would go. That's where you're going to go here, you're going to go here.
That was St. Joseph's, which is now the Hayti Heritage.
That is now Hayti, yeah. And I called myself getting there early one night, and still I saw a lot of people leaving. I thought, well, they're rolling out tonight. We'll all be where we're going in a little while. And I walked in the church, and I saw our pastor, Reverend Melvin Chester Swan, was standing at the podium. And standing side by him was Mayor Winscrew Barrett. That was the night they had the boom scare. And nobody picketed because what they said was, Reverend Swan was saying, I want every boy to make sure that every girl gets home safe. And the two of them were standing at the podium at the same time. So everybody went home. I walked out, and I lived right up the street from there. So I walked out, and there was a white student, I guess. Some of the students did have cars. He said, where do you live? I said, well, I live up the street. I can just run on up the street. He said, no, said Reverend Swan said he wanted every boy to take her. They put me in the car, and away we went, and we passed en route to where I was living. Two more girls, I think they were going to North Carolina Central. So no, get in the back. As soon as we take her home, we're going to take you home. But that was the one thing I remember. We didn't pick it that night because of the bomb scare.
Faye, you will.
I was really going to say what Virginia said because I was in the audience when Mayor Gruberic spoke to us. And I think he was the first one out of the sanctuary. but they did announce that we need to match up with a male student to take us back to the dormitory. And one of the church members drove me and my girlfriend, but on our way he stopped and bought us hot dogs. So we forgot all about the bums and enjoy those hot dogs.
As you pass the mic back, would you let Jake tell us a little bit about his role? Now, Jake was a journalist at this time, but he developed a very close relationship with, as you call him, Big Floyd. So would you tell us a little bit about that relationship and the story you told me about working with Floyd McKissick going to the March on Washington, and also Little Floyd.
Well, Beverly will be okay with this story. Floyd's father had been a very close friend. Floyd and his family and my family and I were in this first integrated church that we had here, Covenant Community Church up on Chapel Hill.
Can't hear you, Mike. Try using this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. But we had been involved in all of this together, and what was the particular thing you wanted me to
well, tell me about the working relationship you had with Floyd McKissick Sr. and how you went with him to the March on Washington.
And I really just tried to support young Floyd's father in every way that I could, and I was involved in the demonstrations, but I was able to cover them and not get arrested because they were afraid to. They didn't want to arrest a reporter for anything, and I was like an armor, and so I could serve in any kind of capacity that I wanted to. Really, I had pretty much a carte blanche. But and I'm trying to think now. Well, Floyd Sr. and one of the things that I'd like to talk about is the fact that at that time, Floyd Sr. was one of the four major or five maybe leaders in the civil rights movement nationally, and I had gone up to Washington for the march on the 28th of August of '63, and Floyd Sr. was the second speaker there that day after Mr. Wilkinson, then John Lewis, and well, Jim Farmer had been arrested in Plaquemines County, Louisiana, and couldn't get out of jail to go to the march. But John Lewis appeared for SNCC, and SNCC was founded in Raleigh in '61, and then it had become the militant spearhead of the movement at that time.
Sure. And then when they had a later reenactment of that march, it's my understanding since you went to the original march.
That's right.
Tell us about how you went to another march and another McKissick.
The senator here has a really wonderful, diligent, and perfectionist assistant named Emily, who when I had just told this story to Eddie the day before yesterday, and he asked me to repeat it tonight. But when I called it over to Floyd's office, and I said, would you ask the senator what he's going to do about this march on the dedication of the new memorial in Washington? And she said, yeah, that she thought you had a conflict already. And I said, and she said, why? What were you? And I said, well, I happened to go with Big Floyd to the march in '63, and I would really enjoy the poetry of going to this march this time with Little Floyd. And Emily started laughing. She said, what did you call the senator? I said, Little Floyd. I said, that's Southern. I said, I'm very Southern. And I said, Little Floyd will know what I mean. And I said, I called his mother and called him Little Floyd to his mother her whole life. But I didn't know whether she was ever going to forgive me for it. She thought it was a little insubordinate to call the senator Little Floyd.
That was a wonderful story. I asked Jake if he would tell that story today. Robert, during this time, you were taking lots of photographs, I guess, and you and others around town were sort of documenting things along the way. Are there any specific scenes or different shots that maybe you took that stand out in your mind as memorable?
I don't have any that stand out in my mind like that, because I didn't know, I wasn't looking at it as a history-making thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was out there trying to make a living for my family. So, I was just shooting pictures, going, covering whatever they asked me to do. Never even dawned on me that this would come up again. It really did.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mayor, after all of the discussions, was there a point? I know you talked about when Harvey raped and with the Turner's Barbecue and others seemed to change the tone. How long did it take before the masses, or was it the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that really caused the total segregation in the Durham merchants and other places?
Within 8 weeks, your city of Durham desegregated voluntarily, and it stayed that way. That's historically referenced. That's more than a year, Mr. Davis, before the first Civil Rights Act was even passed. And I might say this, during the discussion there was a congressman from Florida, Samuel Gibbons, came to me and he said, "We want you to understand, Congress does not lead, it follows. And what you did in Durham gives us something to follow." Now, I don't want to overstate that in the overall picture, but it did happen. Your community, that was a beautiful composite picture that Durham presented to the world. And I just hope that will continue. That was a beautiful moment. It was a humble, willful expression of human witness. We shouldn't ever forget that. We shouldn't ever erase it. Let me suggest that we use it as a reference and an emulation, so that on any future challenges that face Durham, that befall Durham, we will remember how to reconcile and resolve as we did in the past and serve our beloved city that way.
I'm going to ask Virginia to make a statement, and then I'm going to ask if we could begin the question and answers by asking Senator McKissick if he could talk a little bit about his perspective on all of this and the legacy of his family.
And I just want to say there is a documentary entitled, Durham Self-Portrait, that speaks a lot about this and about the way Durham, it paints a nice picture of us. So if you haven't seen it, they showed it on, they tell me, Channel 18 almost all of the time, Durham Self-Portrait. But it gives a pretty good description of what some of the things we talked about, and particularly the way the problem was finally solved.
That's right. I think Steve Channing, is involved with that, yes. Senator McKissick?
Well,
Well, first, I'd like to thank Eddie Davis for really being the person who I consider our local historian. Because so much of what you've heard about today is being captured, it's being recorded, it's being memorialized. But Eddie has really been in the forefront of this for really the last 2 decades, and he really deserves high recognition because those memories of those that were part of that era are quickly fading as that generation passes on. And in some instances they talk about it, but in many instances they have not captured what it was all about. And I think you've heard testimonials this afternoon from people who are in the forefront, who were there, who were active, who were involved, and really the leaders in this community at that time. Of course, my father was one of those persons who was among that leadership group. I was able to observe firsthand so much of what's been discussed. When you hear about Mayor Barrack and what he did in that time, I think you have to think back and understand that there were still segregationists running for governor in the state of North Carolina at that time. You were talking about somebody who had to show leadership. And yeah, we have people repressive today in office, but it took a certain amount of political courage to be able to confront the merchants of Durham and those that were out there employing people, because the simple things that we take for granted today were not the type of privileges we had then. It wasn't just about the lunch counters. It wasn't just about whether you could stay in hotels and motels, but whether when you went to Sears and Roebuck, whether there were black salespersons that were there, whether when you went to the supermarkets, whether it was A&P or Winn-Dixie. And yeah, we were out there picketing supermarkets too. Why? Because the only employees that they had that were black were those that took your groceries to your car. And when they waited on you in line, you were not given the dignity of change being placed in your hand. They threw it on the conveyor belt. And if you went into a dry cleaner and you happened to be an African American, you didn't get greeted as yes sir or yes ma'am. It was boy. Okay? Or by your first name. You're talking about basic human dignities that black people did not possess at that time. It wasn't just about the water fountains and the restrooms. Things that we do take for granted today. But yeah, when you talk about pulling together that list of merchants, and you talk about pulling together all that required to transform a community in 8 weeks, it's radical, it's significant. But it did come at the forefront of a time of demonstrations, all those mass demonstrations. And when you hear about those 700 people being arrested, it was overwhelming for the jails. But I remember that same night that all that occurred, my father used to drive a black Ford, a 1960 Ford, and he had just sold it to somebody else who was active in the civil rights movement, a young lady named Rosemary. And that car was parked down there that night. And part of that mob was so angry, the white mob that had gathered, that they took that car and turned it upside down and flipped it in the parking lot, crushed the roof of it. So while we kept things calm, there were incidences where things like that occurred. And the type of threats that you're hearing about, the bomb threats that were referred to, with my family being in the forefront of desegregating the public schools in Durham, and my oldest sisters being among the group the first to go to the junior high and high schools, we got bomb threats daily, every day. It wasn't a day in my life where you couldn't go to that phone and hear a bomb threat. And you say, who is it? It's another threatening call. It's another crank call. And these calls came in at such a pace that many of those students in North Carolina Central that you're speaking of, as well as those that were involved in other organizations, particularly the Black Muslims and groups like that, would literally sit on our front porch every night from sunset to dawn with rifles and shotguns. Because this was a time where churches were being bombed, people like Medgar Evers were being assassinated at their homes. We had bombings down in Selma, you name it. So it was not far-fetched and beyond imagination that could have occurred right here in Durham. And when you went on those picket lines, and I would go out on those picket lines, frequently cars would come by yelling nigger at you. all types of things. They threw out flyers and cards. And what did they say? You've been visited by the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. It was intimidation to stop you from coming back. And you get letters in the mail at home. We got to the point where my mother would use Playtex gloves. Remember those old plastic gloves? Because you'd have to pick up the envelopes by their edges because you wanted to send them on to the FBI. Why? Because the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan were so bold that they'd send you letters with their letterhead, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. They were not afraid. But you'd always want to trace it back to who it may have been. So that's the background. That's the era. Those are the type of life experiences that were occurring on a routine and daily basis. And to see Durham, in its unique way, go above and beyond and not give in to the intimidation, not give in to the fears, not give in to what had become institutional racism, and to discard it and to do it before the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is something this community should always feel proud of, something that can show us that as a community, regardless of those bridges that divide us, as the mayor said, we can overcome our differences. We can excel. We can reach those aspirations that we thought were perhaps not always attainable. But these soldiers here that were on the frontier, those that were involved on a daily basis, and you know, it's remarkable to me to hear their testimonials. I see Miss Hortense McClinton here. She was the first African American professor over at UNC. She housed those demonstrators in her home. And there were people coming in from out of town that were active in civil rights movement that were involved in that effort. And my dad was first to integrate the UNC system years ago. McKissick versus Carmichael lawsuit in federal court. The person who argued it ended up being Thurgood Marshall, who went on to become the first African American justice in the United States Supreme Court. So I mean, there's so many people that I think of that and I could go on and on and on. Linda Rose Hubbard, you name it. That there are people who have been involved in civil rights in Durham and in this community. These people have been so much involved. Virginia, I remember so closely from that period. Robert was always there with his camera. There was another guy by the name of Purefoy. Remember Purefoy? Yeah. Who had an amazing archive of photographs. Jake, as he said, first integrated church in Durham that I'm aware of, Covenant Community. It's over there where Foursquare Restaurant is today. It used to be Claire's Restaurant on West Chapel Hill Street. We would go there each and every Sunday. But the Duke minister from Duke, who was there, Art Thomas, Art had a bookstore over on Ninth Street. Because he had an integrated church, what did they do? They went over there one afternoon and beat the hell out of him. A bunch of Klansmen. But he did not allow that to stop his congregation from meeting each and every Sunday.
Senator?
Yes.
I just want to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jake Phelps's house was burned to the ground by the Klan.
And you see, there all those types of incidences. I mean, there's so many of those that we could speak of. You know, and Jake was always in the forefront. Jake was kind of the local hero. He was one of those that could get the news story out, that it would be fair and that would be balanced. He could always show up for all the civil rights events. And it's amazing that he was able to do it with a paper like the Durham Morning Herald in a southern city like Durham, North Carolina, and that he wasn't terminated and discharged and told to go on his way because he kept telling the truth. He did it in a fair, reasonable, and a balanced way, the way good journalists should be. And he was always there, active and involved. I know my father admired him greatly, as well as the mayor, Virginia, Fay. Virginia was always there, always active, always involved over in North Durham, and always involved throughout the city. And always had, yeah. Our home affectionately became known as the Dewdrop Inn. And that was simply because my mother and father were so inviting that what they would do is make it an open house Those people like Roy Wilkins that were spoken of was a character in NAACP, James Farmer, they became permanent fixtures because they stayed with us in our home in Durham when they came. It was not unusual to have 25, 30 people for dinner each and every day. They talk about the civil rights movement being somewhat spontaneous. You could sit there and hear all the planning going on in that room on any given day about where these demonstrations would occur. One name for someone who's passed away, who's not here, was also so active in that period, was John Edwards.
Yeah, oh yeah.
John Edwards was a local hero, a local legend, very much involved in later years with voter registration efforts, but he was actually the named plaintiff in a lawsuit against the Carolina Theater to integrate the facility years ago.
Senator, here's an article that Jake wrote. The headline is "1 Week in Office, 2 Years of Work," talking about Mayor Barry. And the byline is John Phelps.
There you go. And John was, you know, he was excellent. I always called him Jake, but he, you know, he's like an uncle to me, you know, just always a permanent fixture. And of course, Eddie, I don't know what you wanted me to say or needed.
That's fine. We're kicking off. Let's see if we can use the last period of time here. If there are comments and questions that may come from the audience. Thank you.
We're about to redevelop the heart of downtown Durham, and I'd like to see the development of that skyscraper and the area right around it with the African American Museum history that kind of etched in the words of the spirit of this town. The senator just expressed eloquently just now in the history that we had here, and people like the way it seems, and that's the very. And Floyd McKissick, who deserves the credit way beyond Durham for what happened in civil rights in this country. If we could all try to get behind the people who are planning the development of that downtown Durham now, and to make these names part of our language.
Don't forget Ben Ruffin.
Ben Ruffin, absolutely.
And one thing I'd like to say, even before all this pact occurred where it was a mass desegregation, during a time where all the places like Woolworth and Silver's and downtown Durham were being picketed, there was one institution that opened up that lunch counter before all of that, and that was Walgreens. Of course, when Walgreens did it, all the business went away. They closed down. And I think it was probably close to about 35, 40 years before they returned to Durham again. But Walgreens deserved recognition for doing something that they were not required to do, but it was the morally correct thing to do.
We've got time just for a couple of questions. We try to get you out by 4:30.
Yeah, just a comment. I didn't think of it until I got here on seeing, because my dad was a lawyer in New Jersey. A good friend of his was Ray Brown. Ray Brown Jr. was later on, was a lawyer. But Ray did a lot of work, senior did a lot of work with legal defense on it. I remember he came over to our house, early 60s. He'd gotten back from the South and met with all these people. And he said, there's the guy, the Southern guys are the tough guys. If the civil rights movement succeeds, which it will, it's the local people we have up here, the school teachers, the counselors, we talk to the mayor. It takes a lot of right-thinking white people. It's very, and I remember him saying, this McKissick guy, there's nobody tougher. And McKissick, he said it. He said he's fearless, he'll do anything. He was the driving force. That's great. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question?
Steve, they doing all this crazy. They ain't looking after the homeless people, trying to find a place to stay at, stuff like that. Thanks.
Somebody want to address the issue of homelessness?
Well, I guess I would just say that, I'm sorry.
I just want Virginia to tell, I'm a friend of Virginia, and I have breakfast with her, and she has something very interesting that happened when she was arrested that the policeman said to her, and I really love this part. Please tell it, Virginia.
Oh, quickly, I know what Joyce is talking about. When one of the police officers said that, if you were my daughter, I'd take you across my lap and spank you. And I don't know where it came from, but just right out of the sky, I said, if I were your daughter, I wouldn't be here for this.
Lynn, before you go back, let me just suggest that you look at, get a chance to look at today's newspaper. There's an article talking about the ordinance and other issues surrounding the homeless. So I think the Durham City Council and other groups, the county commissioners, and other agencies around are trying to do as much as they can to try to address the homeless issue.
Thank you, thank you.
Hi, I'm Heidi Carter. I'm a member of the school board here in Durham. I'm actually serving as the chair this past year, and I wanted to say that, due in large part, I think, to federal and state policy, our school system in Durham is becoming quickly resegregated. Currently, we have more than 80% of students who are minority, either African American or Hispanic. And the percentage of white students in Durham Public Schools has now dropped to below 20%. So if we don't have an integrated school system, it's very difficult, nearly impossible actually, to have very many integrated schools. And so I just wanted to raise up this statistic. I don't know how many people are aware of that. It concerns me as a member of the Board of Education. Of course, our #1 priority will always be to the children that we serve, trying our very best to provide excellent educational opportunities to all those children in all of our schools. But as a member of the Board of Education, I believe that children learn best in integrated environments, and we as a community, I would like for us to try to rally.
And wait, in the second part.
We're talking about two different subjects here. Now, one is education. That law was passed in 1954. Duke University integrated in the early 60s. It was one of the slower universities really to fall in line. Vanderbilt and Johns Hopkins, I remember, were in the lead, and North Carolina had to because it was a trouble.
It was the fall of 1963, that same year, that Duke admitted its first undergraduate students.
And the other question is, did Duke have any influence or the family on the integration of Durham?
Well, certainly there were Duke students who were involved in the struggles that you all had. But also, if you look at the Duke family, I guess you're talking about people like Mary Siemens. She certainly had a very vital role. The mayor talked about how she wrote him during the time that she was out of town during 1963. But she also had been a member of the city council and had been involved in lots of different issues there. And I would guess that some other relatives of the Duke family may have also encouraged integration. Now, Jay, am I right here? Because you later worked at Duke.
There's a letter here from Mary Siemens when it happened back in '63. Dear Wins, yesterday's report, this was the one on national CBS News, the Durham integration report. Yesterday's report was a real triumph, and we join in expressing gratitude for your great leadership in this time of challenge. Your actions have been masterful, imaginative, and fruitful, and as a result, Durham will be the leader of the South. For the hours of selfless toil and the creativity that you have used, we do thank you. May God bless you and yours always. Congratulations, devotedly, Mary and Jim. This comes with love to Mary. So she was a big supporter of mine at that time.
Jay, did you have something to say? If you want to have the last word, grab a mic. Did you have something to say?
No, I was just hoping Wentz was going to, he had just showed me this letter.
Okay. Well, we thank you all for coming today.
We do thank you for coming, and we thank Ed for giving us a reason to come. We want more.
We do have evaluation forms on the back table. It's really helpful to us to get your feedback. If you would take the time to fill out one, we really appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Extremely diverse crowd.